So I was replaying Spider-Man on PS4 and I noticed something. In one of those cutscenes where I was wearing the Sam Raimi suit, there was something rather amiss.
I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't. Still partners?
Always.
The eyes weren't moving. Obviously this was the Raimi suit, but the difference was glaringly obvious for the first time. I mean, you can look at these two and tell the difference in what you perceive.
Still partners?
Always.
Ever since the beginning, Spider-Man's main characteristics have always included hiding his real identity. This was something Stan Lee and Steve Ditko recognized while drawing Spider-Man.
Steve Ditko. Steve designed the character, the colors, everything about the costume, and he also gave it such personality.
Peter Parker could never take a chance with his identity. The full-faced mask has always been there throughout the many iterations over the decades. This obviously posed a unique challenge. How do you show emotions if you can't show the face? And their answer was rather something really creative. They created a Spider-Man whose eyes could move. But unbeknownst to them, another factor was working in their favor. In the year 1967, Dr. Paul Ekman, an American psychologist, traveled to Papua New Guinea to find out if human expressions were indeed universal.
There was a fundamental argument between Margaret Mead, who said it was another culture-specific language, and the earlier writings of Charles Darwin, who said it's universal to the species. To answer that question, I needed to study people who were totally isolated, who could not have learned their expressions from the media, from seeing Westerners.
The tribesmen were asked to show how they would make certain faces if a certain situation occurred. Your friend has come and you are happy. Your child has died. You see a dead pig that has been lying there for a long time. You are angry and about to fight. Their expressions were the same as the Western idea of facial expressions. We all, in fact, all over the earth react in the same way. Our eyes appear curved and high when surprised. They become narrow and develop crow's feet when we're happy, and they start to sag when we're sad. Everyone on earth exhibits emotion in the same way. Now, early on, Spider-Man and almost all the Marvel comics were made with a Eurocentric culture in mind. I don't think Stan Lee expected the web slinger to reach as far as Japan and to be universally interpreted in the same way. Interesting side note, this Japanese show was the first one to introduce a giant mech robot, which later Toei, the parent company, transferred onto Super Sentai and later its counterpart Power Rangers. This came from this.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
In human faces, it's the eyes and the surrounding muscles that are the most expressive part of the entire face.
And the reality today is all governed by this thing, the camera. It can get in very close and it can guess what is behind. Everything is ambiguous, everything has to be guessed at, everything is subtle.
In animation, we had always projected these emotions onto what is actually not human. But 2002 was a very different time. James Acheson, the costume designer of Spider-Man, himself admitted that the mirror-like lenses lacked a certain depth of emotion.
We went through a huge, long, circular trip in terms of developing the costume of Spider-Man. And over a 6-month period, we came back to believing that we had to sort of respect the icon.
Disappointment, intrigue, sadness, anger, these were part of many emotions that the artists on the comics were able to convey while him remaining masked. And that was a sticking point for the first movie because, you
can't just have your characters announce how they feel. That makes me feel angry.
But James Acheson and Sam Raimi were restricted by the technology of their time. Sam Raimi, much like any good filmmaker, found a creative way to circumnavigate the technological restrictions that were a hurdle in his vision. Blow his mask up. Every single time there was a need to show the depth of Spider-Man's expressions, have him experience an accident that either shreds his mask apart or makes him take it off. The problem persisted throughout the many amazing Spider-Man movies until they changed hands in someone who knew exactly what Spider-Man needed.
Hey everyone.
Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige, much like any good filmmaker, knew the importance of the role's eyes play in emoting the inner state of a character.
Because Tom was totally happy to wear a mask. He's like, great, if he can act with one eye, that's an interesting challenge to him.
He tasked Judiana Makowski, the costume designer of Civil War, to come up with a modern take on the iconic Spider-Man costume. And this time, finally, Spider-Man had movable eyes, with a neatly tied up explanation.
Can you even see in these?
Yes, I can't. Look, I can see in those, okay? It's just that when whatever happened, it's like my senses have been dialed to 11. There's way too much input, so they just kind of help me focus.
These camera aperture-like lenses finally allowed Spider-Man's stories to be told on the celluloid in a way that Stan Lee would have envisioned them to. But even with the new costume design, the expressions were restricted to a bare minimum, namely pain, intrigue, and surprise. They had only scratched the surface, but somewhere else people were working on unleashing the entirety of Spider-Man's potential. The animation allowed the directors to tell the story in a way that could not have been possible before on the big screen. They took the best parts of the animated series and the comics and amplified it furthermore. Into the Spider-Verse was truly the Spider-Man movie we deserved. And to me was no wonder that it won an Oscar, reaffirming the fact, despite what many critics say, that we are not even close to exhaustion of creativity in cinema. And highlighting the fact that when it comes to emoting on cinema,
Don't wash the mouth. Wash the hands.
No, wait, what?